Welcome back to Green is Good, and we're so honored to have with us today Helena Molin Valdés. She's from Paris, France. She's the head of the Secretariat of the Climate and Clear Air Coalition to Reduce Short-Lived Climate Pollutants. Welcome to Green is Good, Helena.
Hi, great to be with you today.
It's wonderful, and thank you for taking the time across the world to come on our show today. We're so honored to have you on. And before we get talking about all the important work you're doing at the Climate and Clear Air Coalition, Helena, I would love you to share your story and your biography first with our listeners and how you even came to this very important organization and the very important position you have as head of the Secretariat.
Well, my background is as an architect and urban planner or working in urban context. I'm originally from Sweden. I moved out from Sweden maybe 30 years ago, went to Latin America, worked for many, many years in different countries. And also my long history has been in a field that is often referred to now as disaster risk management, disaster risk reduction and resilience building of communities. And in that context, I worked a lot on climate and extreme climate events and how to deal with this with practical solutions, and also working on environmental issues and around climate change. And that brought me, and I worked a lot with different communities and different expert groups and scientists, but also planners and city officials and government officials. And that brought me close to where I'm working now, which is related to climate and clean air quality, as something that is also causing many extreme events, actually, if you think about it. And I've been here in Paris working on this particular project since July last year, and I really, really like it because I can see that we can do a big impact in people's lives.
Before we get talking about all the important work at the Climate and Clear Air Coalition, can you please explain what it is, what kind of partnership it is, how many countries belong to it, so our listeners fully understand how big this organization and how important this organization really is?
Well, we are a coalition, and it's climate and clean air, so we are really focusing our efforts on two big things that are very connected. One is air quality and clean air, and the other is climate, and including our efforts to curb global warming, to diminish climate change. So this is the focus of the coalition. It was started off only 2 years ago with 6 countries and the United Nations Environmental Programme, as a big concern of how to be able to work on these two issues in a combined effort, focusing on action, on very practical things to do to reduce air pollution and at the same time improve climate. And among the 6 countries that started this was, of course, the United States, with Hillary Clinton, who took this very strong to her heart, but also Sweden, Canada, Mexico, Ghana, and Bangladesh. And this was in February 2012, and since then we have grown to more than 90 partners. Many countries, roughly half of them are countries, and roughly half of them are international organizations, including many of the development banks, the World Bank, the International European Bank, etc., and also NGOs, non-governmental organizations, especially those concerned with clean air, climate, and also cities. We have the C40, for example, which is the combination of many megacities in the world concerned with climate. We have other city networks that work with us as well. And we have increasingly some developing countries, NGOs or non-governmental organizations as well that are working on these issues. So altogether, 90 partners, 91 actually to be exact, and half of them are countries.
You have a big organization and you have an important role to manage here. So this is very important stuff for our listeners who want to learn more about Helena and her colleagues' great and important work and what they're doing and how to get involved. Please go to www.unep.org/CCAC. I'm on your site right now. It is a beautiful site, and there's a lot of information there, and I want to get to it. Let's start, though. But let's talk a little bit about short-term climate pollutants. That's not something I hear or read about a lot. What do you mean when you say that, and when you're trying to tackle the problem of short-term climate pollutants, Helena? What do you mean by that?
Okay, we mean we started off a little bit in the context of climate change, which, as you know, is a long-term process caused mainly by carbon dioxide, which has hundreds of years in the atmosphere before it's let's say, the full impact of the global warming can be achieved. At the same time, there is many not so long-lived, actually short-lived, only for a few days, a few weeks, a few years in some occasions, or a few decades, gases or air pollutants, such as black carbon, for example, from cars, from vehicles, from diesel fumes. There is many different components there that are, one, toxic or harmful to health, and at the same time harmful to climate, warming the globe. And these pollutants or these gases are quite a few, but the ones that we have focused our attention is, as I mentioned, what we call black carbon, which it's black. It comes out of diesel and combustion, basically not fully realized. So there are many things that links to transportation, burning of wood and biomass, burning of agriculture, brick kilns. When you see this big black fumes coming out of any burning, that's black carbon, and that is very, very harmful to health, but it, at the same time, is a very climate forcing, as it's called. It's warming the atmosphere a lot. And by improving some of these sources of the pollutants, you can have an immediate effect. That's why we say short-lived and near-term, because it's immediate. You see the results within weeks, months, or years. And so it's black carbon. It's something called methane that comes out of oil and gas production, leakage. It comes out of solid waste. It comes out of agriculture, manure, livestock, rice paddies, etc. And the third big gas that we are working on, it's the hydrofluorocarbons, which is HFCs, which is used for cooling and refrigeration and air conditioning, which is very, very potent greenhouse gas. And because many countries and people in the world now are getting more access to, which they should, refrigeration and air conditioning, this is exponential in the future, how this gas can be used. So we are working on finding alternatives and promoting use of alternative gases to cooling that will not be harmful for the climate. So these are the three big things that we are working on in terms of, and that's why it's called short-lived climate pollutants. It's only living in the air for a short while, from days to years to a few decades, and it has an immediate near-term and immediate improvement. So basically, if you clean up your fleet of diesel fumes, within weeks you have results in the air quality, and you've probably seen it in your cities or where you live. And this is, of course, in something that's mainly felt in an urban context, where you have many people together, where the production of these things come together in a dense area.
And we were talking at the top of the show how big your coalition is, and like you said, it's 91 countries now and so many organizations. And how did you why have so many countries get involved so quickly, and why has the growth been so fast in just a short couple of years? Is it because this is the most critical issue when it comes to climate and clean air and climate change, these short-term climate pollutants? What is your mindset with regards to why your organization has grown so fast with so many countries from around the world?
Well, when we deal with climate change, this is important to stress. The most important thing to do on the whole world should be working on a carbon low economy, let's say. We should really work on carbon dioxide to be eliminated or reduced, because that's the only way in the long run, over hundreds of years for the future, that we can reduce climate change and keep the temperature livable for human beings, basically. So we are all working towards that objective. As we know, it takes time, and we are already in crunch time for the temperature to reach unbearable limits, and that's why we have a big global community working on this. And there is all the governments are discussing how to do this in a consistent way. However, there are, in addition to working on this long-term and CO2 reductions, starting now, obviously, but with results down the line, by working on not only these long-lived and long-term solutions, we can address the short-lived ones, the immediate ones, with multiple benefits. So we are here talking about climate, of course, and by reducing black carbon or methane or hydrofluorocarbons, indeed we can help we can almost halve the warming, projected warming over the next few decades, and that's immense. So if you talk about climate change, and you have probably followed the many discussions around what actually happens, how long it will take, what kind of activities to do, but if you say that working on 10 to 20 different very practical solutions, you can actually halve the projected warming for the next decades, and that's what you're doing by working on these short-lived climate pollutants, on methane, on black carbon, soot. It's soot actually, and HFCs. So it's not that you do, and that is very attractive. A few years ago, a big report came out from the organization that my Secretariat is hosted by, which is the United Nations Environmental Program. They released a report which was done by many scientists from around the world, and US EPA has been very much in the forefront, among others, to do very thorough studies on this, that said that by introducing 16 particular measures, or let's say control, they call it control measures, but activities to, for example, putting filters in diesel cars and improving low sulfur diesel, improving brick kilns and changing some of the kilns, using existing technology, up to 80% of all these emissions could disappear, could be eliminated. And by taking these very practical measures, which are all doable, it's all about existing technology, you would have not only, as I said, the climate benefits, but you would also have very strong health benefits, much less asthma, respiratory disease of different nature, cardiovascular disease, cancer even, skin cancers and others, which are now also being more and more researched around, and you can see the direct relationship between the air pollution and this, what is called non-communicable diseases and premature death. Just recently, the World Health Organization released figures that tells us that almost 7 million people a year have premature death due to air pollution. It's a huge amount of people, and you have many studies in the U.S. that have looked at this health impacts also. So there is an increasing number of studies and research that makes the linkages to not only climate but also health, and then also agriculture and crops. Many of the crops are hampered by especially black carbon or ground level ozone, which comes from release of gases, these short-lived gases like methane that I mentioned before. So up to 50 million per year of basic crops like maize, wheat, etc., is being lost due to these pollutants, because the process of the plant cannot fully develop because it's hampered by the pollutants. So you're actually having I call it a triple win. You work on reducing and improving air quality, and you have happier people, because it's always nice to have fresh air to breathe. You have healthier people. You have better crops and ecosystems in general. You have huge impact on global warming and the climate. And at the same time, in many of these solutions that we are talking about also gives energy efficiency gains, which means that you save money, you save God,
Got it. Helena, there's two big events coming up. In September 2014, there's the so-called Climate Summit coming up in New York, and I'd love to understand how your organization, the Climate and Clear Air Coalition, is going to be involved there, but also on a bigger scale, back in your hometown in Paris, back in the city that you live now, let me just say, in 2015, there's going to be one of the major climate negotiation sessions where leaders from around the world are coming to, and we know that's never worked out in the last 3 or 4 sessions. That we've gotten a lot of talk but not a lot of action. What are these next two events? What do they mean to you? What do they mean to the Climate and Clear Air Coalition? And what do you expect to be the results and your role in these discussions and negotiations? And what do you hope comes out of them?
Well, in the meeting you mentioned in September in New York, it's the United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon who has called on heads of states, a summit of the leaders of the world, to come together and demonstrate not only the will, but also demonstrate what countries, companies, CEOs of companies, and other civil society organizations are willing to commit to do in practical terms to reduce global warming. And what we are going to do by September in our coalition, we are working on many of the initiatives that we have engaged in, and I can talk a little bit more about them in a while if you want. We are looking especially at 3 or 4 of those initiatives to bring to the summit with a big number of countries and companies behind committing to practical action, and that we can actually calculate into a big emission reduction, which will help the climate while at the same time having all these other benefits I mentioned before. And the areas that we will bring to the table is around green freight. And you have in the U.S. something called the Smart Way program, which is very, very innovative and functioning well. It's something that we are working on expanding to the whole world and with many other countries. And it's ready to work also with many of the companies that do move goods around the world, and how they can, through different measures in their supply chain and their logistic chain, really improve, make it greener, so to say, so green freight. So we are going to bring that to the table, and we are working right now, and this particular initiative is led by the United States, Canada, something called the International Council for ICCT, can't recall what it's called now, ICCT, International Council on Clean Transportation, and also the organization that hosts our Secretariat, which is UNEP. And we are working with many countries to have a global action plan where companies, countries, national governments, but also city officials and other civil society organization has very clear roles in terms of achieving this green freight chain in a big scale, building on the good practices that already exist. So that's number one. And number two, we are working with the oil and gas industry to sign up to a framework that we have developed together with a big chunk of the industry to reduce methane leakage out of the production. And more than 8% of the natural gas production actually is lost annually to venting and leakage and flaring. And it's lost, which means lost production and lost income, but it also means that there is a big impact on climate. Almost 20% of all the methane in the world from human-made methane emissions come from this particular industry. So working with the industry to reduce this leakage gives them, in theory, income, some kind of income back.
Sure. But
most importantly, it makes a big difference in the climate. And then we're also working on agriculture and on phasing down this HFC and the cooling chain. So these are
Helena,
the big initiatives.
Helena, we're going to have you back to talk about the success of the New York event, and then we'll have you back to talk about Paris and what's going to be happening in Paris in 2015. We thank you for your time today. To learn more about what Helena is doing with her colleagues at the Climate and Clear Air Coalition, please go to www.unep.org/CCAC. Thank you, Helena, for being an inspiring leader on the critical issue of climate and clear air. You are truly living proof that green is good.